Good evening. We're on the second day of the Nisyros dialogues. We're ready to start. But before giving the floor to Mr. Michalos, let me make a very interesting announcement. So today we thought for the second day to give you the floor to participate to Nisyros dialogues. So during the one-to-one debates that will follow, we will have 5 minutes for any of you who might want to ask any questions. But please ask questions and not, make comments, because we must be quite strict with our time. So, Mr. Michalos, you have the floor. Good evening. Just a slight specification. Even when we have one moderator and two speakers, we could still have some time for questions. But please, since we already have a delay on our agenda, please be brief with your questions, not over 15 seconds or maximum 30 seconds. Do not make any remarks or observations. So let me give acknowledgement to two people. One was here already yesterday, and today we're welcoming the second one from a mission that he was attending to, a good friend from the past, a very important person for the Nisyros Geopark, our ambassador at UNESCO, our friend Evangelos Koumoutsakos. So Mr. Koumoutsakos had to come directly from Paris. He had to spend the night at the Athens airport so that he could be from the very start at the first day of the Nisyros dialogues. My dear friend Yiannis, I would warmly thanking you for all the efforts that you made in favor to the benefit of this island. We will always be grateful for your efforts. Thank you very much. The second person I would like to render homage to is an asset, not only for our island, but also for Greece as a whole. It is a professor from the Kapodistrian University in Athens. I recently met her in the framework of the Geopark initiative. She was in charge of our application for Nisyros to be included in the UNESCO Geopark network, and her contribution was critical and decisive for this acknowledgement. I do not know what we could have done without the help of this professor. So a great thanks to Mrs. Nomikou. We would like to thank you. Congratulations on your work and everything that you managed to do for Nisyros, an island that you shared the same love with us for. So let us start with our dialogues. We can start right away with the first one-to-one debate. A dear colleague, Fanis Papathanasiou, and the honoring former Minister of National Defense and retired Admiral, Mr. Evangelos Apostolakis. Good evening. Good evening to you all. We're on our second day, and it's always interesting to talk with the retired Admiral, former Minister of National Defense, Mr. Evangelos Apostolakis, in this time of upheaval and great changes in our region. Good evening, Admiral. Let us go straight to the substance of our debate. We have 16 minutes at our disposal, but let us start with the issue of PASOK and the issue of the electrical cables that reflects the aspirations of Turkey regarding Eastern Mediterranean, meaning that Turkey wants to have the control over everything. We'll see what the legislator will do about it. But this rationale of Ankara that nothing can happen at the Eastern Mediterranean, and this has already been heard by the Turkish Prime Minister and all competent officials, is that nothing can be decided or done without the control and the approval of Turkey. So let us start with the electric cable issue and the issue of the island of PASOK. Thank you very much, Mr. Papathanasiou. I would like to thank Mr. Michalos for the invitation, for hosting us on this beautiful island and giving us the opportunity to discuss on such important issues. Indeed, this issue has been widely discussed and recently many questions have risen because we see that the works are not progressive. Mr. Maniatis has a much better, much more clear image on this program initiative that has started in 2011. And after many procedures, it reached the phase of implementation. Let us go back in time and see that after the memorandum between Turkey and Libya, there was an effort of agreement on exclusive economic zones with Egypt in order to cover what was not covered by the Turkish-Libyan memorandum, because it made sense at the time, according to international law, is to specify the exclusive economic zones. So our first opportunity to safeguard this right of ours had to do with the island of PASOK and the routing of the subwater cable. So we entered the international waters, a part of the Greek and Egyptian exclusive economic zone. A military vessel arrives, a Turkish vessel arrives. Well, this happened 2 years ago, if I remember well. So our actions were too soft, I would say. What exactly happened at the time? Could you describe us what happened? Was there a concentration of multiple vessels in the region? No. Well, listen, there is a rule here. When you have a sovereign right, you need to be prepared to protect this right. If you're not ready to protect it, and if it's violated by someone else, then you've lost the game. So we had to be more, let's say, our actions had to be more appropriate to the severity of this event. We didn't have to ask for the approval of Turkey according to our memorandum and to the specification of the economic exclusive zones. So Italy got an approval from Turkey in order to have the progression of the works. But Turkey has entered a new phase. What Turkey wants is that the EU and Greece realize that anything that happens within this the region of the Eastern Mediterranean, and especially in the Aegean, Turkey has to take a stance over it. This is something very important, and it's very alarming, and we should be clear on how we react on in such cases. So you're part of the Foreign Affairs Committee at the Parliament. So you've been talking with your colleagues. You've been asking ministers, the competent ministers, what is the government's attitude concerning this new wish of Turkey to have control over everything that is happening in the Eastern Mediterranean, having to give its approval? Of course, the government does not admit that something like that is happening. He believes that all necessary actions were taken, and okay, the cable must be routed and must be installed. This is something very important for Greece, for Cyprus, for Israel. And the answer is yes, everything will be done on time. However, I would say that we must be aware of the danger that this attitude of Turkey might become a repeated pattern and Turkey will have to be consulted on every action that will have to be taken in the Aegean, for example. So there were we had some information on a new legislation that will be drafted by Turkey. There is some information that these amendments in legislation are coming. How will this actually change our relation with Turkey? Well, listen, well, it is obvious that Turkey has this revisionist attitude, and it's not only theory anymore. It tries to institutionalize this concept of blue homeland. And this bill of law that will be adopted will specify the regions over which Turkey will have control. It tries it aspires to limit the use of these regions, and we will have the case of Turkish national law being adopted, a national law that will affect us all. In case of a violation, the operator of the Turkish aircraft or the vessel will say, I am just respecting the laws of my country. So what we see is that it will be very difficult to manage our daily lives. So little by little, we have this rationale of this revisionist concept of a blue homeland by Turkey. So Turkey wants it to reflect it also on its national legislation. We're not sure if this will happen or not, but usually what Turkey says it will do, they usually do it. So there have been several theories on the future, or how the future will look like on the field in the Aegean Sea. Well, based on your experience and after this new bill of law on blue homeland by Turkey, what will the outlook of the situation will be? Well, first of all, we need to see what all these debates and the soft power has led us to. So we had the benefit that we had less tensions on the field, less violations. There was a time period where things were a lot more calm. But who benefited after all from this situation? It was Turkey, because we actually forgave them for anything they had done on previous actions, or, for example, concerning some armament issues and threats against Greece. But after the declaration of Athens, we hear Turkey saying that no, we've already agreed in written that we will have no hostilities, no rivalries. We're not threatening the Greeks. We're not threatening any member of the EU. But after the war in Iran, especially, Turkey is trying to become an actor on the geopolitical field and to gain more responsibilities and competencies. So you see the rivalries between Turkey and Israel on the issue of Syria, or on the borders of Syria with the Kurds, or what comes out of the U.S. public opinion and the Congress, with Trump saying, when I will visit Turkey, I will offer them a gift, meaning or implying that he will bring them the F-35. Maybe this gift be could be buying the engines of domestic aircrafts made in Turkey. We need to understand that the way Erdogan is moving is always claiming for a stronger role on the region. And he tries, so we have this effort of peacemaking between Iran and Israel and the US. And we see that Erdogan tries also to have a share of this peacemaking effort. What I mean is that we need to be very cautious. We need to be prepared to safeguard our own positions. Our positions need to be clear. There's no space, there's no room for discussions or letting things go and become even more complicated. Everything must be solved on time. So we shouldn't have any more gray zones. But we have a multitude of eminent diplomats that have served our country in various positions. I would like to give the floor to our audience. So if there are any questions to our speaker, yes, even from non-diplomats. Non-diplomats actually usually ask the more diplomatic question, the most diplomatic questions. Admiral, in October 2014, 3 months after the coup in Tripoli, in Libya, and the reverse of the regime, there was an effort of direct negotiations between Greece and Libya for specifying the exclusive economic zones. At the time, you were not a minister. Did you know, were you aware of that approach? And do you know why there were no results out of this approach? Yes, I'm aware of the approach. At the time, the Libyan government, Mr. Paraskevopoulos is much more aware of the situation at the time. Well, the Libyan government set some basic lines and had closed the Gulf of Sirtis. So it was an illegal closure of the Gulf. The basic line drawing did not follow the rules, so these efforts delayed, and we had no results out of this effort. I believe this was the reason for not the specification of an exclusive economic zone with Libya. But the way things turned out later on, we see that we can set an exclusive economic zone with Libya in the region, but we need to work on our relations with Libya and with the two governments, or at least the two representatives of the country, the official one and the imposed one, at least. Any other questions? Another question by a non-diplomat. Good evening. I would like to ask the following. You said that our reaction on the issue of Cassos was not strong enough. I will agree with you, but what were the reactions? What have the reactions been in the past with all violations from Turkish aircrafts, for example? What have we done to show a stronger position? Well, I'm not. I don't work in the military, or I'm not a diplomat, but we are usually like that. Things happen, the aircrafts come, and then we take off to show our presence. We don't have a strong reaction to show in any case. I think we shouldn't be unfair to the armed forces because reactions can be seen daily on the field. For all violations, there is a reaction. For any violation coming from our neighbors, we have the interception of their aircrafts, or for violations in the sea, a navy vessel stops the Turkish vessels. In any case, if you have given a legal permission to a vessel, maybe this vessel should be escorted by a marine vessel. This does not mean that we will declare the war. When I say strong position, it means that we need to react in a clear and decisive way. In 2018, we had the case of Barbaros. They arrived to explore, to carry out some seismographic research on the exclusive economic zone that is supposed to be part of Greece. It does not belong to us. It does not belong to Turkey either. So neither of us had any sovereign rights on the zone. But the Turkish vessel arrived and used arguments of force, let's say, and we had to be fierce as well. We told them, no, you're stopping right here, and the vessel stopped. So I'm not saying that we need to declare war against the Turks. I'm sure we all agree on this, but we need to be clear that these are our positions. These are our sovereign rights that we need to protect and safeguard. But all these rights are not negotiable. So indeed, many things happen on the air, on the sea. We're not informed about everything. Some are quite confidential, and they're not, let's say, announced to the public. And this is how some tensions de-escalate. Mr. Paraskevoglou, the Secretary General, would like to ask a question. He's the only diplomat asking a question. The first three questions were made by non-diplomats. So the first diplomat asking a question. Yes, so this was a challenge by Mr. Michalos and by you. So, first of all, my greetings to the Admiral. I'm sure that you will not like what I'm about to say, but on the field, on the battlefield, for 5 years that we shared, he is the top official of the armed forces. I would like to thank you, Your Excellency. So, my dear Admiral, so in this volatile situation in in the Eastern Mediterranean, and we know that Turkey in 3 days will try to build some perspectives for creating the role it always aspired to have, to become, that is, the policeman of the region. But things have changed ever since the US gave them the right to have such aspirations. Right now, however, in a new security architecture that will not be homogeneous in the Eastern Mediterranean, we cannot omit Turkey. It is too big to be omitted. But well, given the neo-Ottomanism and the inclusion of all aspirations and fantasies of neo-Kemalists, and quite a shocking phrase, let me share a shocking phrase from the book of Mr. Davutoglu, he was a theoretician of the neo-Kemalism. So the Turkish governments, after the post-war Turkish governments, cannot be forgiven for not claiming back the Aegean Islands from the Greeks. So yes, indeed, you are right, Admiral. It is clear that we need to have strict lines, clear lines, but we must take into account that no one wants to exclude Turkey. Mr. Papathanasiou, when they wanted to finish to terminate the war in Iraq, it was Erdogan that stopped them for going through passing through Turkey, and ever since they were quite shocked by the power of Turkey. But Turkey will inevitably be part of any security architectural model. What do you believe about this? This is a vague question, too general, but I know you're well aware of your know-how and that you can foresee and can proact in many cases. Thank you very much for your warm words. And indeed, we had great and efficient collaboration at the time. I believe that right now, as we speak, whether Turkey will participate or not in this new security architecture of Europe or the wider region is something that has already been decided. Let us start by the fact that Turkey has many stocks and has acquired many European companies of defense material. So even without a direct assignment of projects, Turkey will indirectly participate. The EU itself shows a tendency to rearming Europe and to increase the capacity of building the military equipment. It wants to take advantage of the capacity of the existing capacity of Turkey. But first of all, we need to set rules, to set preconditions, and if Turkey is to participate in such actions and projects, it must commit itself to any regulations so that the member states will not be concerned of the future. This is a battle, an ongoing battle, and we must always keep in mind what we've already mentioned, meaning that Turkey is claiming for a major role continuously. It has never stopped playing its role, but it will try to play a major role, an even major role in the future. I would like to thank you all, Your Excellency. I'd like to thank all participants. So we will have your questions during the next round. So thank you very much. This debate was very interesting. So I would like to go to the floor, Mrs. Maria Sarafoglou, with Mr. Maniatis, an MEP and head of the Socialist and Democratic Party.
Good evening, everyone. So we are taking over after a very interesting discussion. I believe you agree with me, Mr. Maniatis. I do indeed, because I know both men. This was a very interesting period which we are studying in order to deduce a very important geopolitical conclusion. So let us now open up the portfolio of Europe, and we'll talk about the role of Greece and Turkey. Europe has had to handle successive crises, an unprecedented pandemic, two wars in the broader area, energy and security, and now this race regarding AI. So let's begin with the present situation, and a situation that seems to be much more complex than a simple war. Is this an endless crisis, do you believe, or do you think when the armed conflicts end, our problems will end as well? Well, I think we all know the answer. We are now facing a period of multiple crises, geopolitical, energy-related, digital, etc. Now, what's the problem that Europe is facing? Europe has always believed that it could be an important global player simply using its soft power as a basis. The fact that it's a large economy with 450 million consumers, stroke citizens, which means that it can play a major role. But as things stand today, the US and China are the two dominant forces, and Europe is trying to find some space. It hasn't found it, it is at a loss. Uh, to put it briefly, recently we had official dinner with Ursula von der Leyen with the Socialist Party. I am now in charge of energy and defense issues. And I asked her at the beginning of her term in office, she had promised she was going to put forward a proposal for an efficient strategy uh, of Europe for the Middle East and Eastern Mediterranean. Well, 2+ years have passed and we've seen none of that. What does that mean? That even now Europe is moving forward without a compass in this respect. Efforts have been made from France, Germany, and some countries, which means we are where we are today. There will be more crises. We are absent from the table. Let's hope we're not part of the menu. Yes, well, that is usually the case. Yes, that's why I'm saying it. But right now, Europe is actually making an uh, exemplary effort, we could say, in order to have its strategic autonomy. Yes, but is that at the end of the day simply wishful thinking? From my understanding, in our day and age, security is not only borders, but also infrastructure, energy, um, and many more issues. So we are still dependent on US from uh, on the US for security, infrastructure from China. So to what extent can Europe achieve all this? Well, no, this is not wishful thinking. Actually, strategic autonomy is a clear mandate for all the member states, the European Commission, and the Parliament. Now, whether we will succeed in this, we need to, something that we must wait to see. But steps have been taken. We have two excellent reports by Mario Draghi and Enrico Letta, which provide guidelines on this. Have we taken steps forward? Well, let's look at the positive side as well. First of all, we have managed to eliminate our dependence to a great extent from Russian gas. The fact that we're getting dependent on LNG is something that I don't like. I don't want Europe to be dependent on anyone. So there are various alternative solutions we need to look at. In the energy field, Europe is playing a very important role in green energy, wind, for example, solar, non-existence in batteries. Greece, 7 times non-existent, but we'll talk about that later. Well, in the energy sector, at least we have a clear horizon. Well, there's no infrastructure or storage with regard to batteries. Is that correct? But we'll talk about that as well. So, in the energy sector, Europe is doing well. In the defense sector, it's trying to stand on its own 2 feet, despite the fact, and I want to say this publicly, the member states are reacting against it. Although all of us understand that it is necessary to have, for example, a European chief of staff, we can't have 27 different chiefs of staff in Europe. Somebody must coordinate them and operate in parallel to NATO, not replace NATO. But we also need a European um, structure. Yes, but I think that each country views its threats differently. We have different threats in the south and different ones in the north, so it's difficult to coordinate this. Yes, well, the efforts we made in order to have a single currency when the Germans said, I have the mark, and French said, we have our currency. Well, the efforts we are making now to have a single defense strategy is harder than when we're striving for a single currency. But starting with the Baltic countries, Finland, Denmark, Romania, Poland, all of these countries are strongly in favor of European defense. Greece and Cyprus also, the same. They are very much in favor, and some more countries too. So let me be optimistic in this respect. Well, we will, but we can't. What is lacking and is related to the slow rate of development in this respect? Is there a lack of political will? Is it funding? The way in which decision making takes place in the EU? Well, actually, it's the existential problem of the EU, and that is the fact that there's no central decision making center, but 27 decision making centers. This is something I'm experiencing. Although the European Commission is a mediocre European Commission, it does have a core, the Letta and Draghi reports. The parliament, although it has 8 different parties, and despite our serious disagreements, we do have a core, an axis we are following. The condemnation of Turkey and the blue homeland in the report, the socialists, we put down the amendments. The socialists accepted them. So in the parliament, we also have common ground. Where we find difficult to agree is the level of governments. The governments, unfortunately, need to understand that times have changed. Let me put it simply. Until now, we were looking at our neighbor. We now need to understand that our rival, from an economic and commercial perspective, is outside Europe. It's not a competition between Greeks and Slovenians or Croatians and Lithuanians. That's finished. We are Europe and we have opposite us the US and China. We must survive because it is a requisite of our history. So, what needs to change? Well, what needs to change is that we must overcome our existential problem, which is the multiplicity of decision-making centers. If we manage to do that, well, the Commission has managed to do this, the Parliament has also managed to do so, the governments must follow. Well, we'll have to see because we also have the presidency next year, and this is a major challenge. Okay, let's move to hydrocarbons. This is an issue on your agenda that you have moved forward with, and things have been proceeding quickly in recent times. What about the economic footprint of this effort? When shall we see this happening? And maybe this debate needs to change focus, or maybe there needs to be a new dialogue on RES and how we can move forward along these lines. Yes, the truth is we've lost a decade and we have a serious responsibility of the Tsipras, Kamenos, and Mitsotakis governments. We've lost 10 years. Have we lost all opportunities? No. There's still this historical window of opportunity, and I think everyone's understood this. I believe that the government has understood this. PASOK, in any case, it was its creation, and I think the other political parties also. When we will have a result, and what will this result be? Well, right now, Greece should have been receiving some 10 millions of euros from exporting natural gas. So this is going to take us 7 years back. But the estimated revenue from all the deposits that we know until now, and in due course, new deposits are always discovered. What we know up until now, it's 60 to 70 billion euros in public revenue. And let me note that all this 75% will go to the tax system, the insurance system of the country, 20% to the green fund. And when will this happen? Well, already today, one of the criticisms that I have against today's government is that although we have the law in order for all this money to go where we need it to go, social insurance, etc., we still don't have the joint ministerial decision for implementing this law. Greece has been receiving funds all these years from the rent of the maritime areas, from the various plots. Not a lot of money, but some millions. So the GMD has to be approved in order for the fund of future generations to be established. And something based on your experience. So is the future maybe not investing in large-scale energy projects, but rather based on private autonomy, how a house, municipality, an island can produce its own energy? Yes, well, this is linked also to the second part of your previous question. First, let's clarify this. The future of Europe from an energy perspective and a developmental perspective with regard to competition is a green transition. That's where we need to go. That's our only hope. But we need to know that for the next 30, 40 years, we shall need desperately very significant amounts of natural gas. Full stop. The question is, what new is there in the horizon? Until now, and this is the case in Greece mainly, we've had the large players, the main players, entrepreneurs, investors, companies investing in green energy. In Greece, unfortunately, we haven't done what other countries have done, such as Germany. In Germany, right now, 42% of green energy is produced by energy communities, agricultural cooperatives, individual producers, that is, by decentralized small and medium-sized energy producers. In Greece, this 42% that we see in Germany, which is very democratic, I must say, and very effective as well with regard to achieving a balance for the system and socially just. But this 42% of Germany in Greece is only equivalent to 3%. So yes, in future, each building will be an energy source that will have its photovoltaic source, batteries from the electric vehicles of the residents, and an internal system. Our goal at the EU is for 2050 is to have a zero pollutant buildings, and there is no room for failure in this. So I'm sure that we will succeed. Now, let's go to a more political context based on the previous discussion. In a few days, we have the critical NATO summit in Turkey. Turkey is trying to consolidate a number of issues, as mentioned previously by our interlocutors, because Turkey wants to be a policeman in this region. So after this period of tension in the last few weeks, the draft law was for the blue homeland was moved to October. So what's the situation today? I think you also spoke to the ministers of foreign affairs and ministers of defense. So what's your opinion? What stand should Greece adopt right now and the EU regarding such a political challenge? Well, let's clarify that despite the various disagreements for many decades in Greece, there has been agreement, consensus amongst the political parties in power with regard to Greek-Turkish relations, and that is indeed an achievement. A couple of days ago, we had an internal communication from Mr. Yiannis, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and the Minister of Defense, Mr. Dandias, because I can't give you any details because this was a discussion between officials. There is a possibility, or that now, what we have heard, that the draft law for the blue homeland will not include maps, and that is important. Secondly, on an EU level, on level of the EU Parliament, also we have taken important steps, and I publicly invite the Greek PM to take advantage of them. That is, a month ago, the most recent report adopted at the EU Parliament on Turkey, which was introduced to the Parliament, is a report that is a very powerful weapon for Greece vis-à-vis Turkey, where there's mention about democratic rights being violated, but interventions by Erdogan in the opposition, who he changed the head of the opposition party by law. Also, we speak about the occupation of Cyprus, the blue homeland, the cable, etc. So, this achievement of the European Parliament, I hope the Prime Minister in his future meetings and the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Minister of Defense will take advantage of, because the European Parliament is an equivalent instrument. Okay, now we are open to questions. Are there any questions, please? Mayor, you have the floor. Mr. Maniatis, a couple of questions. You spoke about a common European defense policy within NATO, not within NATO, alongside NATO. Can we have Turkey as well. So how can we have a common European defense policy with Turkey? I'm reading about the 1 trillion on weapons. This money has to be obtained somewhere. The welfare state is going to disappear. Right now in Kos, we have a hospital in tatters, the same in Rhodos. So maybe we need to think more carefully about how these funds will be used. Yes, very good questions. And let me be concise. First of all, the common European defense policy will not be a NATO policy and will not replace NATO. It will be a mechanism working in parallel with NATO, which has its own mechanisms. What is this new European defense policy? Is what I said earlier. That is to try truly to do so. If the Americans distance themselves from Europe, as they say they're going to do, they're going to do that, whoever the president is in the next 10, 15 years, and Europe cannot be left without defense. Unless there's a European that says, I want no defense because the Martians are going to protect me. That's not possible. It's the Europeans that must protect us. Today, we still have nothing on a European level. Well, do you know, ladies and gentlemen, how much we're spending and how much the member states are spending on their defense right now? 450 billion per year today, right now. And do you know what this money is being spent on? Well, 80% is going to third countries, to the US and other countries. So this is a major issue indeed. It's not a joke anymore. This money is being spent by the member states in any case. Do we want this money to go to third parties, to third countries, or do we want this money invested in Europe? Well, I say that I am fighting for this money to be invested in Europe, and we have achieved much along these lines. Well, will the countries need to invest even more? I don't know. But it seems that because of the predicted absence of the US, there will be new needs to cover. If the American satellites stop providing image and communication, then will Europe be blind and hear nothing and deaf? So you need to advance in with regard to space issues and space technology, which is used for peaceful reasons, of course, but are required. Finally, speaking on behalf of the Group of Progressive Alliance of Socialists and Democrats, we have said that if countries, in order to support their defense, think of removing funds from the Common Agricultural Policy, the Cohesion Policy, and the Regional Development Policy, then we will vote against the budget. We shall find money from new sources. As we did during the pandemic, it is possibility to find such funding from other sources, and that's our focus. Mr. Servo, a quick question. Without underestimating what is being described in the report of the EU Parliament on Turkey, let me ask this. Who and how many were the European officials who visited Efrem Imamoglu in prison, at least? In order to send a message. Second, to what extent did the report of the European Parliament have an effect on the meetings of the three major European officials with the Turkish presidents? And to what extent did transactional diplomacy and geopolitical necessity leave room for fundamental values about the rule of law and the issue of human rights, which the European Parliament is very rightly speaking about? Well, first of all, about Ekrem Imamoglu. The socialists have at least visited him 3 or 4 different people. Evangelos, the president of his party, has been received by us at the European Parliament and clearly support the democratic functioning of Turkey. So, on behalf of the European Parliament, the Democrats of Turkey are this is the only instrument of the EU that they can address themselves to, the European Parliament. Kaya Kallas and many others are now visiting Turkey. But we need to understand each other. The EU Parliament is the only instrument that has been elected by European citizens. Governments, mainly right-wing conservative governments, which are now the majority in the Union. If you look at who is governing in EU and the European Council, it's potentially the only instrument that is on our side. The European Commission. European Commission has its own choices. It's making its own choices, and the government as well, affected by other parameters. So it is our hope that the weapons given by the European Parliament to the heads of government will actually use all these arguments in favor when speaking with Turkey. Mr. Koumoutsakos. So, I'm speaking under 3 capacities. As a diplomat, the efforts to shape the European defense is something that started in 1995. Yes, it was part of the treaties. Yes, speaking about NATO and the EU, and we're trying to build this defense policy. And now it's quite a new dynamic, mainly because the US seems to be moving away, withdrawing. The catalyst, ironically, is not Europe itself, but our key transatlantic ally. And that's why things are happening much faster. The mayor asked this question, and I repeat it. In this new horizon, is it possible for Turkey not to have a role to play, either indirectly or by proxy, as we used to call it. For example, let's say country X, will it not be a carrier of concern on behalf of Turkey and interests related to Turkey? I'm talking one of the European Union countries. Now, from my capacity in Parliament, the reports of the EU Parliament when I was there have always spoken against Turkey because, as you said, it's the only elected mechanism of the EU. However, these reports had a minimal political impact in the past. And I don't know whether this new report that you spoke about will have better luck. Talking now from a geopolitical perspective, I think you know my views. You spoke about laws during the PASOK party in power. Well, please allow me to restate that the main law was in 2014 under Samaras Venizelos government. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, let's be brief because Alexia is standing up, but there's great interest amongst the audience. Okay, let me start from the end. The key law for hydrocarbon law is a law 4001 of 2011, PASOK government, Giorgos Papandreou, Prime Minister. Secondly, in 2014, there was a major tender that was signed by me in the Ionian Sea, south of Crete also. So 2011, 2014, two different cases. Now, let me add something that is interesting. The role of Turkey in the defense policy of the EU. There are countries which look towards Turkey with a positive outlook. We know who they are. And others, such as ourselves and Cyprus, who don't want Turkey to become a member of the EU. 6 months ago, we took a major step, an important step in the European Defense Industry Program portfolio. I was the moderator, thankfully, with a Frenchman from the French party. And it's important to note that he came from France. He was a French official. And we set 2 key specifications in order to make the participation of Turkey in such issues harder. In order to have a role in European funding, first of all, there needs to be the so-called principle of planning. If you are financed, you cannot also control the relevant system. And secondly, the money, this money that belongs to European taxpayers, must only be given to European companies and employees. So it's not enough to buy the Italian company Leonardo, as Turkey did, in order to be considered a shareholder in European funding. You must also have the proprietorship of the design authority. This is a slightly complex issue, but in any case, we set 2 specifications which affects the participation of Turkey. And I think that's a great achievement. Okay, thank you very much indeed. Discussion to follow in the audience. Okay, let's make a small change to the program because Mr. Fanis is online, and I'd like to call to the floor Professor Sotirios Serbos to moderate the next discussion. Mr. Konstantinos Fanis is the Director of the Institute of Global Affairs and International Relations Professor.
Mr. Fanis, well, it's the debate is quite intensive. We've been talking on the role of Turkey. We've heard a lot of interesting things by Mr. Maniatis, and since of President Trump, and the host will be Mr. Erdogan. So for 1.5 years now, ever since the latest Trump administration, the US have changed their relations with NATO. So the problem, Sashul, is that when a country is financing the budget of NATO and does not understand its commitment towards the rest of the member states that are part of NATO, and it creates mistrust concerning its goals vis-a-vis the rest of the member states, all this creates problems. NATO is totally different than it used to be, regardless of the family photos or the smiles between the leaders. But I believe we will all agree that NATO has a different role to play since its very creation. The defense minister of the US had a plan to reduce the military forces in Europe, and I cannot know how Mr. Trump will look like in the photos next week, but he doesn't seem to believe in the role of NATO, and he doesn't actually believe in the role of the US as a dominant force within NATO. He has already stated in the recent past, that a country that does not satisfy the US interests in a more narrow way, meaning the way Mr. Trump sees the US interests. So in this case, Mr. Trump does not feel committed, even if the state would ask for the activation of Article 5. And Article 5 has only been used once in the past after the US had suffered the 11 September attack. Thank you very much. And you, Mr. Sebros, what do you think about the role of Turkey? Yes, I believe that since 1991, after the Cold War, and in 2014, and with the crisis in Ukraine, with the Obama administration, thought that we needed to work more as Europeans do. We didn't see anything also, but despite the declarations during the first Trump administration, we believe this will be the very crucial summit of NATO. And I believe that this is why the US also wants Turkey to be alongside, because this distance and this withdrawing by the US, but let's not fool ourselves. What the US is doing right now is actually what Trump had already promised to do and announced to do. So due to geopolitical necessities, Turkey is considered to be a necessary actor in the region, especially due to the Russian and Ukraine crisis. But now we don't have the standalone pillar of NATO as we did have in the past. So the Turkey, with this opportunity of the NATO summit, sees the new opportunities. But on the other hand, on one hand, we have the role of the EU, but on the other hand, we have this regional security system that will be built after the world in Iran. We will never be back to where we used to stand before the war. So Turkey wants to have a role in this respect. And due to the war in the Middle East, although Turkey didn't want to have a US footprint in the region, it now sees that the Middle East without the presence of the US creates even more threats against Turkey itself. So both sides, and I would like to link this with the previous debate, both the West and Turkey see actually reasons, concrete reasons to have a new approach, to a new reach out. But this should have already been included in our national strategy vis-à-vis Turkey, because it has to do with our national perspective, but also the wider picture. We shouldn't just limit ourselves to disagreements on the timeout of the Athens Declaration. This was another thing. So right now, in the framework of being of having a more proactive diplomacy, and while taking into account what is happening right now, we need to see how we will approach our allies with regard to our national peace and defense, because we're at times of upheavals and new realignments. And I believe this is something we're lacking in the public opinion within Greece. We're too introvert, and hopefully this will not, and this lack of this lack of conscious of what is really happening right now, maybe it will also affect the upcoming elections. Well, indeed, we mentioned the Athens Declaration, but what about our national strategy in this volatile environment? First of all, with regard to Turkey, well, this country has, of course, some advantages. First of all, it is an ally to the West that diverts from the European values. But right now, we're in the Trump world. The values don't matter, ideals don't matter. This is quite obvious. And this can be seen in all US resolutions. But the EU and the US turn a blind eye to this more strict and autocratic regime by Erdogan. So Turkey wants to leave its own footprint and wants to have its own trajectory. But with regard vis-à-vis the Europeans, it has the advantage of preparedness. If, for example, there was a crisis in the Ukraine, and we had to deploy some troops and a buffer zone that will be developed between Turkey and Russia. If all Europeans add up the troops that were sent, they could not compete Turkey in numbers. And Turkey can make such decisions overnight. This is a great advantage in autocratic regimes, because the president is not accountable, has not to account to anyone, to the parliament, that is. Well, the case of Greece. Well, Greece has made some small steps, and the Athens Declaration gave us some benefits. We gained some time, and we used this time in order to to increase our military force, because when negotiating with Turkey, Greece needs to have military power. If we can have a deterrent force, Turkey will see us as a peer that it cannot ignore, and it must take into account our arguments and interests. But vis-à-vis Turkey, we should have been more, let's say, powerful, more reactive, because I cannot understand why in 2026 we still discuss on the expansion of our territorial waters in the south of Crete, or why we are so left behind with regard to public diplomacy. So we have an intense debate concerning the European defense and Turkey. We have so many diplomats in Turkey outside the Turkish borders. They try to affect public opinion and, of course, the decision making centers in favor of the Turkish positions. I would say that I've heard more than 100 articles by academics or diplomats just in the last month. So with regard to public diplomacy, Turkey is much more developed. In any case, Greece needs to make decisions, not always taking into account our relations with Turkey. This is a mistake we made in the past. We've paid for this mistake because we never actually agreed with Libya for the EEZ. Because we believed that we would lose some of our arguments or some of our negotiating force vis-à-vis Turkey, but that was a mistake. And of course, we lost that opportunity because some years later, Turkey actually made an agreement with Libya on the limitation on this with this memorandum, which is actually illegal and illegitimate. But if we think out of the box, we need to see how we can put pressure on Turkey and on actions, on diplomatic actions undertaken by Turkey. But we need to form and shape our diplomacy, not always taking into account the effect that it will have on our relations with Turkey. Maybe one day we will have the implementation of the IMEC project, but if we want to be, let's say, if we need to have too much ambitious, too ambitious. We need to focus especially on our foreign policies as a whole, as the Eastern Europe and the Southeastern Europe as a whole, and not only vis-à-vis Turkey. Yes, indeed, there were omissions, and what we've heard about the role of Trump vis-à-vis the EU. Well, public diplomacy, it's something that we bounce low below our weight. Joseph Nye used to tell us that whoever has the best storytelling is the one who actually wins. But when we talk about communication strategies or digital diplomacy, in 2022, I wrote about Altun, just to show you why we should have this kind of diplomacy in Greece as well. With regard to national strategy, yes, I agree with the expansion of the territorial waters. Yes, we're not talking about the Aegean. And our inaction actually was beneficial to this maximalism of Turkey. We need to be proactive and not reactive, that is true. And I agree with what was said during the first panel concerning the subwater cable. This didn't have to do with the islet. Yes, well, we know that, excuse me, we know that this, the continental shelf, that part of our territorial waters did not belong neither to Greece nor to Turkey. But the subwater cable does not harm or change the continental shelf at the bottom of the sea. And so especially in times of upheavals, at the end of the day, it is, after all, the force that becomes legitimate. It is what you show and how strict you can be on you when drawing your lines. So maybe in the case of Turkey, we need to test several keys in order to open the door. Well, maybe it is wishful thinking to just say that maybe with the institutionalization of the blue homeland, we might see a whole new situation in the region. But for the first time now, we have an issue of a Turkish EZ in the agency. This is unprecedented. In the past, we had the gray zones, but Mr. Maniatis said that according to what he knows, that there will no maps be submitted in this new project. Yes. Turkey, well, this it's a pattern for Turkey. And what about some fisheries zone? If some fishery zones are added to this EZ, we know what is happening in various islands, various frontier islands of our country. There's no silver bullet for Turkey, but especially in current times, and since we need to focus on proactive diplomacy, knowing that you have Trump and Erdogan, two transactional leaders, if I were Tayyip Bey, I would not lose any opportunities and ask Trump for including, for example, the agency in the agenda, because just to explore if there's something there. So we had a series of opportunities since 2022 with the Ukrainian war, where we had to go in discussions in depth concerning the way they perceive our role in the Aegean. So if we're lacking something here in the West, is this concept of think big. We know the role of Turkey in some repetitive issues, but we need to survive somehow. Some time ago, the Trump administration threatened the national sovereignty of Greenland. So we see that there is a repetitive pattern that might reach our own issues, our own national issues. So we need to adapt, especially if we don't have these great powers or actors that will focus on our problems. And maybe something that we have in theory, but we're also seeing that in the field, on the field. Solidarity is something that is exchangeable. You give and you take. Mr. Paraskevopoulos, someone said that talked about revisionism and some. Don't actually have to do only with Greece, but they actually have to do with the West and with Europe as a whole, and the Treaty of Lausanne. So Turkey wants to claim through this restorative revisionism concept, saying that we need to protect our interests. So in this case, we needed to have a clear discussion on where we stand exactly, and an honest discussion by all our diplomats and all our politicians abroad, because politicians can shape the public opinion. The governments and the opposition should actually learn to have a new culture of discussion, a new culture of political speech and debate in order to avoid any rivalries vis-a-vis our allies and Turkey as well. Thank you very much, Mr. Paraskevopoulos. Hopefully next year we will all be together on Nisyros. And I would like to call to the floor the Ambassador at Honorary, former Secretary General at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Paraskevopoulos, and Dr. Elena Lazarou, who is the Executive Director of the Hellenic Foundation for. This was quite an intensive debate, but it was so. Now I will give the floor to our next speakers.
So we're talking about the Eastern Mediterranean and the role of Turkey in the Eastern Mediterranean, geopolitical developments as a whole. Could you give us your estimate on how geopolitical developments are looking in the Eastern Mediterranean? Thank you very much indeed. First of all, I'd like to thank you most heartedly and my heartfelt thanks to the one who is behind this event, the organizer, Mr. Maniatis, who has done me the great honor to have me on the board of this foundation and to quote unquote oblige me most politely each year to come here and participate in this conference. Thank you very much indeed, Mrs. Tathuli. Before answering your question, I would like to make a well-documented reference because as diplomatic people have an unusual reputation. We are disliked by society, as I was told by a renowned British diplomat, of speaking in vague and abstract terms. Diplomats always speak in a documented fashion, or should do so. So with regard to the Turkish bill of law, we needed to speak in a documented fashion because what we hear is not from government officials necessarily, but from people who come from the other side of the table, and we're fully aware of what they say. So, first of all, let us clarify that the Bill of Law has been voted in, and it gives the President of the Turkish Republic the possibility to implement the Bill of Law in any way he may decide. What does this mean in practice? Well, this postponement to October, that's what we hear, doesn't have anything to do with uh, this its objective perspective. What do I mean by this? This bill of law is put into effect with executive protocols and executive orders, as any first year student of law could understand. So, in addition to what the Admiral said earlier, who talked about Turkish pilots, Turkish captains, who will claim that they are in the Turkish territorial waters when asked. So let me underline the importance of this fact. Turkey always wants to be in a position of power and doesn't want to be restricted by the decisions it makes. So let's put aside any delay and postponement. Executive laws, executive protocols mean that the fact is before us. Eastern Mediterranean and armed confrontation, strategic confrontation. On the one hand, we do have strategic confrontation, but not between giants. We have Israel and the US and Iran. We are not diminishing the losses, the risks, the gravity of this event. But in any case, we have a situation that is dangerous, catastrophic for the global economy as well. But we don't have the confrontation as we did in the past between the Soviet Union and the US, and we hope we never have such a confrontation between the US and China as well. Another parallel event happening at the same time is that there is no risk, as there was in the 60s and 70s and partly in the 80s, of the proliferation of this crisis to the broader region. The hardcore of Arab countries which were fighting against Israel and were trying to wipe it off the map in previous decades no longer exist. They are elementary forces, they're basic forces. Syria doesn't exist. Iran also. Egypt has signed a peace treaty and diplomatic relations treaty with Israel, and Jordan's also. Of course, this means this doesn't mean that we can be at peace, but there's no risk of proliferation of this conflict. So these are the deterrent factors which reduce the risk because we need to look one step further. So do you think the major risk has been dispersed since we're sitting at the same table? We have a Qatar as mediator. The risk of armed conflict reigniting is no longer there. Mrs. Tassouli, I will answer you in relation to the title of today's meeting, an architecture of security, a new architecture of security. Unfortunately, in practice, we know that there has never been a security architecture in the Middle East. What has existed from 1948 onwards is at times, armed peace with local wars and conflicts. So the new security architecture, in my personal opinion, based on what I've read and what I've experienced and discussed with others, cannot be a comprehensive architecture. Why? Because, to paraphrase Huntington, we have a clash of cultures, not a clash of civilizations. Civilizations are one thing, cultures are our identity, ethical, religious, etc. So let's say things as they are. The previous president, Ahmadinejad, and Erdogan made the mistake to do so as well, that there should be no state of Israel. The official title of the um, Revolutionary Guards is Al-Quds, the Guards of Israel. Unfortunately, Israel is our partner, but there has been a distortion, unfortunately, of political beliefs of Israel. It's not the same as it was in the 40s, 50s, 60s, or 70s. They have now adopted a very harsh stand, and we know the influence of the religious parties as well. So we say we need to conquer the biblical countries. Well, when you have these two things in front of you, how can you create a security architecture? Dr. Lazaro, what about the role of Europe within this context? The ambassador spoke about Europe in relation to this, spoke about the situation in the Middle East. What about Europe's role within this context? Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Ambassador. Uh, Please allow me also to thank Panagiotis Michalos for inviting me to be here and also to be a member of the Scientific Council of the Dialogues. I just returned to Greece and I truly appreciate this. And also, let me say, as Mr. Philly said, that public diplomacy is happening right here and now. The videos being created, what people are hearing, the fact that we had the representative of NATO speaking yesterday, putting Nisyros dialogues on the radar. Also, our colleague from Bulgaria, who is present here, and I'm sure will disseminate all this news. This is public diplomacy. We write in public media and public think tanks, given the size of the country, to highlight why some things should happen as they should, based on public law, respect for sovereignty, and the competitiveness and the interests of the EU. So to speak about the EU, Mr. Maniatis has also spoken about it, and many other people who know the situation there very well. So let me say a couple of things maybe that may not have been mentioned yet, and could connect what we're saying about the Eastern Mediterranean with the EU and some challenges for Greece, which is undertaking, as many said, the presidency of the Council of the EU next year. As was highlighted by Cyprus, this is indeed an opportunity to highlight the issues related to the Eastern Mediterranean and this region, and for our countries, because I come from both these countries, to highlight the positive role they can play in strengthening the resilience of Europe, its foreign policy and competitiveness. The Draghi letter and any reports have shown that this is a key objective. We had the former Prime Minister, Mr. Letters, with us in May, and he told us very interesting things about this. So the EU now is looking to find its role in the security context and what European security entails. So this is under discussion and consultation within the framework of the new EU security strategy, which is going to be published in the fall. It's interesting that it was postponed for after the NATO summit, and this is potentially linked to the fact that the summit will involve to a great extent the role of the European pillar in NATO 3.0. European pillar is what we now refer to as the states of the EU and Canada, which is interesting to note. But something that's going to happen for the first time is a prioritization of the threats for the first time, based on which the strategic planning of its potential and policies will be based. An effort was made along these lines in 2022, but we didn't have a prioritization of the threats. They were simply depicted, but they weren't put into priority order. And this is very interesting to note because with everything that's happening around the world right now, I think it's understood by our partners that our region, the southern part of Europe, the Middle East, and all that the Konstantinos mentioned earlier, the maritime system from the Mediterranean to the Indo-Pacific Sea, ocean, must be a priority of this defense policy. And maybe not defense policy, but security policy, because this region is very important indeed for energy security, for maritime safety, for maritime safety, which we haven't talked about greatly. For example, we have subterranean. We have cables which are traversing the sea and are responsible for the digital communication to a very great extent, and that hasn't yet been discussed. Talking about the US, do you believe that Trump will be focusing more on defense spending by European countries? Last year, there was an agreement regarding this in The Hague and the commitments undertaken by the various countries. It was a very short summit and a short communique because it was a make it or break it situation. So this year it's going to be implemented and everybody's going there knowing that. The Europeans and the Canadians are going there showing with evidence on how they have increased their defense spending. And as Ruben said yesterday, the question now is how this funding will be used. And that is directly linked both to the contracts given to the defense industry and the supplies with regard to the future planning of the member states and the procurement. A couple of days ago, the joint interest public programs were issued, the European Defence Industrial Programme that is, so that the member states of the EU can jointly produce. We also have these NATO consortia, so I don't think this is going to come up against each other. The thing is how they can work together so that we don't have overlapping, and that is a key objective. And of course, the issue of the participation of third countries. And it needs to be very clear that third countries that will participate need to be committed to be aligned with the interests of the EU. And those which are not in line with the spirit of the EU, of course, should not be included. So the title speaks about prospects, and I know that you're always very realistic in your views. So are you optimistic about our region? I would like to answer very briefly on three levels, including the comment that you just made. Firstly, talking about some fixed issues that are unalterable, and these are geography. Israel is a garrison state and will continue to be surrounded by Arabian countries in a state of disarray at the moment. However, generations of fighters or terrorists, however you want to describe them, continuing to emerge. Secondly, we constantly speak about alliances. In the average citizen's mind, the word alliance means that if Turkey attacks us, Israeli soldiers will come to Evros or the islands or Egyptians. There are no alliances per se. There are partnerships that include military collaboration and security. So, in we have this partnership with Israel since 2010. It was initiated by Israel, and all governments continued with this, and we're right to do so. But this includes things that cannot be controlled, but also social sector, health and hospitals, and evacuation in case of war. What are fixed parameters? Geography and history. History says that whenever Iran was conquered in the past, it was conquered after vicious wars by invaders from the east always, and once from the Arabs. There is the term zero-sum result. What does that mean? You get a zero-sum result, dear Admiral, only when you're in Yalta in 1945 and Tokyo Gulf in 1945. So here I'd like to mention a couple of phrases by the great thinker Amos Oz from Israel, who looks at things much more clearly than the Israeli governments. And he says, you make peace with your enemy just because he's your enemy. Secondly, the rule of the game is survival, comma, the survival of both opponents. This may sound like the optimum result, but it is a realistic result at the heart of the problem in the Middle East. What can be done? Well, firstly, engage Iran. The big mistake, the countdown started in 2017 when the Americans, under the Trump administration, left the GSA POA agreement for the control of nuclear weapons. I would like to point out, as I said yesterday, that the IAEA, the Institute of Nuclear Energy of the US, had very deep and full control of the Iran nuclear program, and so no prospects of nuclear weapons being manufactured. They left, and after 2020-21, or rather in 2024, they made a full exit. Engage Iran. Iran is weak. It is not Iran as we spoke about it 2 years ago, saying that it was a local superpower and controlled the whole area up to the Mediterranean after the 7th century AD. And of course, the synthesis of the matter, the new security architecture cannot be implemented. We have Greece, Cyprus, and Egypt or Libya. We need to make the optimum group collaboration, a kind of OECD in that region, a forum that could be the first step for appeasement. But this in conjunction with what we said before. Okay, thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Mr. Lazaru. And now we move to the next topic, elegy and climate change. And I'd like to invite Mr. Konstantinos Matthew.
We have Mr. Mathiudakis, professor at the National Metsovian University, former Secretary General of the Ministry of Energy and Climate Change. Welcome, Mr. Mathiudakis. Let us start with a topic that we're fond of, both of us. Electric power. I think this is something that interests everyone, I believe, here. So the title of our session has to do with invisible threats of energy dependence, crisis, and autonomy. When on our power bills and this energy crisis, whether we're managing power in an appropriate way, where it is more expensive than in the rest of Europe. So is the power cheap in Greece after all? Thank you very much for your question. But before I start, I would like to thank Mr. Michalos. I'm very happy to be here, to be back. Very happy to contribute in my way. So your question brings me back to our discussion yesterday. We talked about how people get their information, and there were some referrals to fake news. And I'm saying this because we have been getting fake news on the price of power in Greece, meaning that it's cheap. And all this is based on data that actually compare only prices, and they compare total prices, absolute prices, without taking into account that the Greek consumers have a lower revenue than in the rest of Europe. The last piece of information had to do with the impossibility of half of Greeks to go on vacation this year due to the power price. And to have all this data published trying to explain that we are very expensive. Yes, but could you give us some examples, the European average and what we actually pay here in Greece? Well, listen, there are some various categories of consumption. In the category of 40% of households, we are in the 12th position. But in the category of 30% of consumers, we are at the 7th place with regard to the price of power. So with regard to purchase power, we are above the average concerning how expensive the price of power is. But if we use other data in order to give different arguments or make different points, this, I believe, is a waste of time. But let's go to the issue of the RES. We are doing quite well in this field, but what about accumulation of energy? This is something that we could talk about. Why haven't we made any? Why haven't we prepared ourselves for batteries, power batteries? That is, this is something that we should discuss about. Could these technologies change rapidly, but could they help Greece in storing power so that we can have lower prices in Greece as well? Well, first of all, indeed, with regard to the introduction of RES, we're doing very well, and more than almost half of our power needs are covered by RES. But with regard to storage, we are tragically behind, even compared to our neighbors. And I'm saying this, I'm stressing this because our neighboring countries have reached 2 gigawatts, 2.5 gigawatts, and we've just started 2 months ago. So we'll not give you specific data, but 2 months ago, the vice president of the operator of the transfer system, of the power transfer system, gave us some explanations with regard to these slow developments in storing capacity. He said that there are some conflicts of interest. There are actors that will lose money due to storing, and this is why we're not progressing. But without storage, we have the weakening of the small photovoltaic parks to bigger players. Those were the words of the vice president of the competent authority, so I have nothing more to add. But before moving on to more complex issues, let us talk about critical raw materials. This was something that came to the forefront due to the Trump administration and the competition amongst the great powers. China, for example, tries to make a good advantage of rare earth elements and critical raw materials. In Greece, do we make good use of these critical raw materials? Are the possibilities of exploiting or making use of raw materials that we haven't used or haven't focused on to date? Well, for example, gallium was one critical raw material. Hellas Gold, not Hellas Gold. I'm talking about the company by Mr. Mytilineos. It was a company that extracted gallium, and we have great capacity in the National Authority of Mining. Held a conference talking about all the deposits by Hellas Gold, for example, not only the ones that are active, but in other parts of Greece as well. And Mr. Maniatis was the one who took great steps while serving at the competent authority, at the competent ministry. We set up this mining authority. Unfortunately, some scenarios that we had already drafted had to freeze. Well, hydrocarbons were already mentioned. Mr. Maniatis talked about it. I will ask you, however, says the moderator. Well, such projects are quite complex, but since we have all this mineral wealth, why cannot we use it? Well, they are complex because we need to be able to do something, and we must have the will to do that. So you mean that there is no will to extract our mineral wealth? No, I'm saying that being able to extract means that you need the necessary resources to organize tenders. But in the case of hydrocarbons, things are different. And let me repeat the words of Minister Papastavros last October, who talked about prejudice. Then this is why we didn't progress with hydrocarbons. So, in the case of mining resources, things are quite complicated. In the case of hydrocarbons, we have public tenders and public companies But why is everything so difficult? There is this, the know-how exists with regard to gallium, for example. Mytilineos has already started extracting. Yes, but these raw materials didn't have the same value that they have now with the electric vehicles, the batteries. Yes, but due to the AI, we see that these raw materials become valuable. Do we actually have the political will to make good use of these elements? Well, at least there is a wish. I'm not sure if there is political will. There's a difference between the two. But how can China, for example, handle the issue of rare earth elements or critical raw materials? Why was Greenland on the forefront? How can we make use of gallium, for example? These are all elements that are used in microprocessors and in new generation batteries, like lithium batteries, for example. Lithium is such an element. Can we produce lithium? From what I know, we do not have any indications of lithium deposits, but China has already started controlling huge lithium deposits. They're, after all, pioneers in such technologies, photovoltaics, batteries, electric vehicles, all all sectors, all products of application of these elements. Well, one last question, and then we will have some time for our audience. Well, let well, this the current government focuses on the acceleration of projects, for example, concerning hydrocarbons, and despite the Maniatis law, all this was left freezing, left in a drawer, speak due to prejudice, as you explained. So this new world of Trump and the theory of drill baby tree, we started drilling once again, and we're back in hydrocarbons. Um, well, we didn't take any initiative. It was the US companies that asked us to explore, and we said, yes, okay, according to the Maniatis law, we can give you permission. Yes, okay, but I'm asking you, what about change? What if a change in the US administration happens? I believe that we should continue what we've started. And this is what I'm explaining. When we started, Trump was not in office. So hydrocarbons will still remain valuable. And the, the one country that will supply that is supplying natural gas to Europe is Norway, which is 100% a green economy. And however, it is the major hydrocarbon producer in Europe. So it is another thing to apply green policies, and another thing to produce hydrocarbons that will be valuable for many years to come. So let us give the floor to the audience now. If you have any questions, please do not express views or make observations. Okay, I'm Dhulis. I'm Mr. Moscos Kourlis. I'm from the island of Nisyros. Professor, two questions for you. One of the most neglected forms of energy is the geothermal energy. Nisyros could contribute to national economy a great amount, great quantity of geothermal energy, and replace imports, oil imports. So why isn't this being done? And secondly, do you believe that it is feasible from a technological point of view to exploit geothermal energy without any environmental footprint. Why are we stopping this? What is actually stopping the geothermal field of exploitation of Nisyros? It is very easy to answer to your second question. Yes, we're near the Turkish peninsula. We have plants of 2 gigawatts of geothermal energy, controllable RES that is not depending on the weather conditions. That is exactly what geothermal energy is all about. But there's another issue here, more generalized, but also very important. For something to progress, we needed to have the approval and the participation of local communities. Local communities have their own sensitivities that, of course, we can very easily understand, and their hesitations need to be taken into account. But local communities need to understand that they can benefit from RES. So this is not the case in Nisyros. And let me be direct on this. On the island of Nisyros, the mayor who is present here, I will be frank. Well, the answer was no, no to geothermal energy. And the mayor himself, who is a scientist, has already carried out studies concerning the feasibility of geothermal energy exploitation in Nisyros. So if we have the participation and the approval of local communities, and if we understand that we can use such forms of energy without any dangers to the local communities, this is the only way to progress. Mr. Mayor, would you like to comment on this? Well, I have no. Geothermal energy will never be used on Nisyros, and I'm clear, crystal clear on this. As long as there are inhabitants of this island who love this island, the geothermal energy will never be used on this island and will never be extracted. Of course, this is for environmental reasons. We are the UNESCO Geopark, and Nisyros will never use geothermal energy. Full stop. But I have another question for you, Professor, because I've been reading recently that, well, about the use of nuclear energy. Do you believe that our country, due to the seismogenic relief of the country, well, will it be possible for our country to use nuclear energy? Yes, yes, like there are countries like France and Scandinavian countries. Yes, they use it. Greece should not go towards this direction. And I have clear about this in public, but I will not get into details right now. And why not? Just give us one or two reasons. The Nordic countries have now much cheaper power. Why shouldn't our country use nuclear power? Well, you mentioned the Norwegians. Norway is a serious state. For 2 years, they worked hard, and 2 months ago, they decided not to move forward with nuclear energy. Yes, of course, we have Slovenians, we have the Swiss. Yes, there are other examples, but for us, for Greece, nuclear energy will be the most expensive form of energy that we have at our disposal. Some days ago, the nuclear energy, the National Nuclear Energy, congratulated themselves because they finally got rid of nuclear waste that we had stored since the 60s. So imagine how hard it is for us to handle nuclear energy. Well, net metering, net billing, well, yes, net metering is, of course, more beneficial for growers. Well, my question had to do with nuclear energy, but I believe that we've been witnessing what prejudice is all about. We saw what prejudice is all about, and let me remind you, my dear professor, what you said, yes, that we're all passing by. I never say never to nuclear energy. No, 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 I never said never. I just said that today we should not opt for nuclear energy. I find it quite surprising that in such a panel, we're talking about energy and all the small mistakes that, or small or bigger mistakes that we made concerning um, fossil energy, for example, that we shut down the Ptolemaida plant earlier than we should have. We have all these small modular reactors. So this is quite surprising what listening to your answer. Yeah, I think we should focus on nuclear energy, not the hydrocarbons. This is bringing us back to the past. Of course, they're necessary, and we need to make some steps backwards. And if Turkey can have nuclear plants on seismogenic territories, what will we do? Just sit and watch? Well, with all due respect, I believe that the government must support our laboratory that has been operating since 1965. It's a pioneer in nuclear energy developments. We have auditors, Greek auditors, supervising nuclear energy plants abroad. I'm afraid you're victims of fake news. We do not have small modular reactors in operation right now in the West. Everyone is talking about them as if they were in our backyard. There's only one Russian and one Chinese, and the US with no, there's nowhere. They're now trying to build them, but in the press, we've been reading about them as if they were uh, uh, ready to commission. So, a few words on the opportunities of nuclear energy. Before closing this debate, Mr. Mathiodakis was clear on this. First of all, Greece is seismogenic. So, which local community will accept the installation of a nuclear reactor? Secondly, nuclear energy, objectively, is the most expensive form of all available forms. And I'm talking about the traditional nuclear energy that has been tested for 40 or 50 years now. These small modular reactors are an innovation, and they will cost even more until they become more mature. So maybe we could wait and see. This is what we've been talking at the European Parliament. So I've talked with the four greatest European energy providers, and I asked them the following. Everyone is talking about these small modular reactors. When are you going to be ready to install the first European SMR? In 2035 was the answer. And just like Mr. Maniatis explained, is that there's only one Chinese and one Russian SMR that is currently in operation. So Europe needs to develop research and foster this innovation and this technology. Yes, because in some years from now, we will have the installation of such reactors. But the Prime Minister has already announced on his own, without consulting any political parties, any think tank, any university, that Greece is interested. But how is Greece actually interested? Have we asked the university, the Polytechnic faculty? Have we asked at least one local community to accept such infrastructure in on their territory? It's it's getting interesting since we have the rector amongst us. Well, let's hear what the universities have to say about this. Mr. Sarafoglou, I apologize, but I'm fond of challenges. Do you remember Fukushima? Is the plant still in operation? Yes, it is. But what I don't want to hear is, well, it's not, I don't want, we might heard about tsunamis being uh, provoked caused by nuclear reactors, but earthquakes are no longer a cause for not moving forward. But why should the Prime Minister ask someone or consult? Well, he expressed his personal view. Anyone who controls the national strategy and the energy policy, should it be asked why? Should the Prime Minister ask why he chose this or that direction? Thank you very much, Professor.
Maria, and now you shall be speaking to the rector, Mr. Yiannis Hazioriou, and because it's getting a bit late, the next two discussions are not going to include questions so that we then have time for dinner. So first of all, Mr. Michalos, I think you found next year's topic, right? Nuclear energy, I see, is a topic that is causing a lot of interest and disagreement also. This is indeed one of the questions that that I was going to ask you. From a scientific perspective, we see that Europe is investing in technology, data centers, but with AI, we also have a new environmental and energy dilemma. We're not talking about the risk of energy transition and the energy cost, but the question is, could the nuclear energy be an answer to this immense quantities of energy and water are used for AI. So could we turn to nuclear energy? Yes, the answer is yes. But allow me half a minute, first of all, to thank Panagiotis Michalos for yet another year for inviting me to this wonderful island of his. Mayor, this island of Nisyros, indeed out of this world. And in these years, I have made new friends, broadened my horizons, and learned so much from the excellent participants each year. So thank you very much indeed. So speaking about nuclear energy, first of all, in the case of Greece, I think we need to clarify that we don't know it all. There are only intentions being mentioned regarding the use of nuclear energy. There's one issue related to this, waste management, and to what extent it is an environmentally friendly form of energy. Since we have no experience of it, and since we have no experience, we cannot issue aphorisms. I cannot agree to restrictions or limitations or no in relation to what Kostas Mathiodakis said, my friend. This nuclear waste, there was not nuclear waste. Some Americans knew how to use them. We had bought them in the past. The Reka had got them, Mr. Simopoulos. So we have exceptional colleagues in the Laboratory of Nuclear Technology, which needs to work. We have Democritus right now, which does not have a nuclear reactor. Or if it does, I imagine it would be a bunch of metal. So the energy needs in the future are going to be intensified. Many speak about AI and the need for availability of energy, of electricity to maintain this infrastructure. And it's obvious that immense quantities of energy are going to be needed to cover the energy requirements of these supercomputers themselves and in order to cover the needs for cooling this infrastructure. The temperatures are immense. In addition to Daedalus at the N2A in Athens, we have one of the biggest supercomputers in Greece, which is now being installed. We're using our current cooling systems, and when I asked the technicians about it, let me go and switch off the cooling apparatus. So what will the temperature rise to? From 25 degrees, they told me it will go at 70 degrees Celsius in seconds. So I'm learning as well. The problem of supercomputers development is not the capacity and the know-how for their development, but the availability of energy for their operation. So, are you in favor of this? Yes, I'm in favor of anything that offers a perspective. I don't understand why we should say no, we should refuse. This is a huge discussion, Mrs. Sarafoglou, even being carried out amongst the Greek ship owners. This discussion has begun, and if anyone who ignores this is basically not being extroverted. There's a discussion of nuclear reactors being used for ships, for example. We cannot have an internal combustion engine replaced by a nuclear reactor for the propulsion of ships, but this may happen sometime in the future. Somebody says, I don't want wind turbines because we're destroying the environment, but we can't have any more wind turbines because the environment is saturated. Okay. There's an international dialogue on nuclear energy, but I think, Greece has a role to play in this as well. So, in relation to Daedalus, a supercomputer at the National Technical University of Athens, do you think that this supercomputer could be the beginning of a Greek CERN, or is it going to be an expensive showcase? No, neither of the two. It is going to be installed at the space that belongs to the N2A at the Cultural Center of Labria, not at the university itself. And any of the participants are welcome to visit it for a tour because it combines modern technology with old technology and will be installed at the electrical power station of the French Labrio Mines Company, a beautiful neoclassical building. It doesn't belong to the N2A, but it belongs to the Ministry of Digital Governance and the TEM. We are not going to become a new CERN. Why? Well, there's no reason to do so. What we need is to be able to cover our own computational needs. And Levelos in the long term is not going to be enough for this. And of course, a lot of resources are going to be required. Daedalus will not only be used by the Greeks, also, it will be used by all European participants. And what's important to note is that in Daedalus, we will have the Pharos program running, which is already being developed by colleagues at the N2A. So to answer your questions, I am clear on this. We are not going to become a new CERN, and Daedalus, the supercomputer, is never going to be set aside. So the National Technical University of Athens has played a key role in this. We had the inauguration of the program by the Ministry of Digital Governance. Let's now talk about the university. For the third year, it's the top university in Greece. And its renown globally is increasing continuously. It's going up the rankings. Does this mean that the National Technical University has its own position in global competition and Greek universities in general? It's one, I'm sure of one thing. There are particular features regarding the Greek university, but let me speak about my own, the National Technical University of Athens that I know. It has nothing to fear with regard to the private universities that are going to be established in Greece. It is top. It will remain at the top, not only because it's good, excellent professors, but the excellent infrastructure, because we have the best. And that is our driving engine. Is it the people? No, it's the students. It's the students. We have the best, the top students, and they are our driving force, and they make us excel. Young people have their own driving force. They try to put their positions in difficult professors in difficult position, and in this way, they make their professors become even better. So a combination of the philosophy of the administration and the human resources. Yes, and the N2A is actually a jewel for Greece, a gem in Greek academia. We have Mr. Koumoutsakos here, the vice president. What is needed is a lot of support on behalf of the government and for the government to see the N2A as an actual gem for the country. How is the success of a university measured and how does it translate into the real economy? Okay, ranking is important, academic renown, publications, research. In practice, are posts at the university, academic posts, attractive, progress, innovation? How would you elaborate on this? Well, a lot of things are important with regard to the value of a university. Before speaking, if we start talking about the ranking of a university, it's unfair uh, to have these rankings in relation to Greek universities. I believe in the predictable future, we will not have English-speaking courses, so we won't have international faculty. We're not going to have people learning Greek in order to attend our university. The courses will be in Greek, and I'm opposed to changing everything and having English-speaking courses. With regard to the Greek universities and this particular institution, its value is evident in the value of its graduates. The NUA was established in 1837. The next one was established in 1955, another 100 years later. So it was the first to start building Greece, and it will continue to do so. It's the graduates of NUA that created modern Greece. The technology on which the economic growth of Greece is based needs engineers. All professions, of course, are important. So very interesting answer. A couple more questions before we conclude. Firstly, if you were able to change one law related to Greek universities, what would it be? Particular, for example, in relation to entering Greek universities? And secondly, is brain drain turning to brain gain? Are people coming back? Let me answer the second question. The first needs more elaboration. Well, with regard to brain gain, I think that in this case, again, we're talking about aphorisms. People left that were potentially replaced. Their services to the Greek community were not, however. But the truth is, and I heard this recently, that of the 10 who left during the crisis, 6 have returned. And maybe they will all come back at some point. Growth, quote unquote, the production of new scientists is covering these gaps. Greece right now is an attractive environment for young scientists, particularly engineers, and I see that in the institution in which I have the honor to be the rector. 2% of the graduates of N2A do not work, which means that people who don't want to work don't find a job. Maritime companies try to get hold of our graduates when they're still in their fourth year of studies. Of course, people at the age of 22 may change their mind frequently, but that's a different story. Recently, with our career office, we had an event at Sarafoglou. 65 companies came, 1,400 appointments booked. They come to N2A, to the rector's office, because they want to get hold of executives for their companies. And you can't imagine what specializations come to us. So right now, this is a very favorable environment, and let's take advantage of it on a state level. What you say is very encouraging when we're talking about the absorption in the labor market for so many years, and things have changed from what you say. Yes, it's all true. The fact that only 2% of our graduates are unemployed and something similar is happening in other institutions was the result of a program that was implemented and a survey was carried out. And this data reflects the situation during the crisis, financial crisis. So next year, maybe you can answer my question about what you would change in relation to Greek universities and the system for being accepted as a student. So the countries compete in relation to innovation, AI, universities. These are issues that are changing our life. That's how we will be proceeding in the next few years. Well, let me comment on this. Mr. Michalos, if we meet again next year, I try and answer her question. And secondly, with regard to innovation and connection of entrepreneurship with the labor market is something that we're still lagging behind greatly. And also nuclear energy maybe next year, because I think there's a lot of interest. Yes, I think we'll have a panel on nuclear energy next year, and I'd like to invite to the panel for one-to-one. Mr. Giorgos Koumoutsakos, Permanent Representative Greece to UNESCO. So I'm tempted to ask you about the Greek-Turkish relations, but that's not the topic at hand right now. Our topic is soft power at an age of hard power. What are the differences between the two?
I would like to thank from my side Panagiotis Michalos for inviting me to this amazing event, this very amazing place. Panagiotis, unfortunately, I want to come every year. Well, the great challenge is that right after a discussion full of energy, so intensive, and how to attract the interest of the audience. Well, let's start by saying that, okay, the agenda is great, was great. We talked about science, economy, but we need to find time and space for something that turns Greece into superpower. Greece might be a small country, but it is a cultural superpower. And in the context of such debates, of such events, we need to talk about culture and civilization, because culture is the main factor of a national supremacy or promotion, because the economy and national defense allow us to project power within our region. But globally, beyond the frontiers of Europe, all around the planet, the promotion and the projection of the force of Greece is culture and shipping. This is why we need to talk about culture as a factor of national force and national power. Let's let's explain, first of all, what hard power is. It means to impose to the international system your will, your priorities, by using or by threatening to use military force or economic consequences. But soft power, on the other hand, is the contrary, is to be able to persuade someone else to follow your priorities, but on the basis of acceptance towards this other involved party. And your tools are science, culture, and your position in the international system. And if we're having this discussion, and I chose this issue, this thematic, is because I want to raise awareness on the fact that hard power is dominant in analysis. The cynical use of hard power is dominant in the way we think, and here in Greece, we tend to forget the need to work on our soft power. And so the mix could have a different, let's say, importance and impact. So we needed to make use of our prestige, of our cultural identity in the public diplomacy, as we heard from Mr. Zerbos and Mr. Filis, where they explained to us that we are quite behind. More funding in diplomacy and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The funding is not sufficient for this ministry. This is wrong. Give us some examples, yes, in order to be more concrete, because we can combine soft and hard power, which is smart power. There's smart power, hard power, and then we have smart power that, well, you have to adapt it to the conditions, but you need to have soft power in order to apply it. Well, let me give you two examples. So Greece wanted to become a member of the European Community, where the then Greek Prime Minister had to meet the Chancellor Schmidt. But what did Mr. Karamanlis say at the time? If Germany does not believe that my country has sufficient prestige, I will go to the journalists and explain that the country that is responsible for all this bloodshed in Europe is not allowing Greece, the cradle of civilization and peace, to be part of the European community. So what is our main argument? Our strategic option has foremost been soft power. What about the firearm issue with the North Macedonia? We might have tensions in soft power because there are emotions. Because with the issue of Skopje and North Macedonia, this was a very difficult issue to solve because it was filled with emotion. It was connected, linked to national pride. These are non-measurable elements when planning a strategy. So we cannot have Europe without Greece. And when Greece actually became part of Europe, it was actually admitted that Europe actually found its identity. Well, what about Turkey? Turkey applies a smart power because in some cases it uses deterrence, but it also takes into account some common logic elements, where our good relations with China are based on one thing, and they erupted due to the Olympic Games of 2004. Excuse me, they did not erupt, they actually improved because these relations improved thanks to the exchange of know-how, having as their compass the values of peace and civilization. We cannot ignore what makes us a superpower, and Greece is a cultural superpower. Well, let me come back to Turkey once again, because we talked about this earlier, about this red line. I would like to hear your comment. What is the red line that we need to draw vis-à-vis Turkey? I'm an active permanent delegate of Greece to UNESCO, so I need to be very cautious with my words. But I wanted to answer to your question because it has come up repeatedly. So, what is a red line for a country? When do you actually declare war, for example? This is a question that should not be asked in public and should not be answered in public, and for a very simple reason. Only superpowers or countries with great strategic power can draw a red line, but smaller powers cannot publicly specify their red line, because in this way their rival can choose the time and space when they will test your will to protect your red line. This does not mean that we shouldn't have red lines. Yes, we need to have red lines, and the leaders of the country need to know about it. They need to be precise and clear about it, under confidentiality, of course. And they need to know that everything that has been agreed upon will be implemented. But in small countries like our own, we shouldn't announce our red lines. It is a trap and it could be dangerous. What about the role of UNESCO? UNESCO is an international organization that promotes by far soft power. And the fundamental values of UNESCO is that the war is born in the convictions of people. And this is where we need to lay the foundations of peace. And we need to build mutual understanding with the help of science, with the help of culture. And in the context of UNESCO that applies soft power, Greece is called upon to have an important footprint. The logo of UNESCO is an ancient Greek temple. So we belong to UNESCO, and UNESCO is part of us. Greece is a cultural superpower. We are deepening our footprint day by day, and it was a great success to have the decision by UNESCO to declare the International World Day of the Greek language. It was a way to reverse prejudice that global days, global language days, were only dedicated to languages that were widely spoken, like Spanish, Arabic, French, English. So we actually reversed this status quo, and we said no. Regardless of any quantitative criteria, but only on the basis of qualitative criteria, meaning languages that have shaped the Western way of thinking, like the Greek language, can be considered and be acknowledged as a global language. All great values, which have been the foundations of Western civilization, are based on the Greek language. The Greek language is based on abstract concepts like democracy, theater, music, trigonometry, astronomy, oceanography, ocean. These are words of abstract meaning, and modern science still have to draw from the Greek language their content and the way of describing things. And the Greek language, after thousands of years, still produces concepts of international science. If this cannot be considered as a weapon of cultural superpower, then what could be considered such a weapon? We need to invest in our soft power that needs to coexist with hard power in the ministries of foreign affairs, the Ministry of Culture, and first of all, draft a national strategy of soft power. Great Britain, for example, has public diplomacy bureau with the participation of various ministries, various private organizations, and every 2 years they choose their national branding. They target specific countries. All ministries fund these projects, and this funding is returned to the contributing ministries and organizations. So, if we consider all the possibilities offered to our countries by the use of our culture and the way that we base our values on international law, maybe we will be able to form and shade our national strategy of soft power. I believe this will be a great progress, great development for our country to the benefit of us all. You've been quite optimistic. Yes, a national brand of soft power for our country. And now I will give the floor to Mrs.
Good evening. I would also like to thank Mr. Michalos for this invitation. I'm very proud that for 30 years we have been studying the volcano of Nisyros. I don't know whether you realize where you are. You're at the heart of an active volcano, one of the very few volcanoes in the world, not only in Greece, where you can walk in an active crater. So if you think of how small we are before uh, the magnanimous nature, then you can feel that here. I live here in Nisyros, and that's why I have offered my life for this geopark. And in April 2026, we were finally we finally became part of the UNESCO World Geopark in order to highlight the significance of geology. So, starting with our volcanoes, we start with Methanamylos, Santorini, and Nisyros, which is the corner of this axis, which has been very active in the last 5 million years. Nisyros is the baby of these volcanoes because it has existed only for 110,000 years. I heard a very interesting discussions taking place about the geopolitical and strategic position of Nisyros. What we have managed to do is not to include Nisyros, but also to include Vartia, Marigousa, Strongili, and the 6 nautical miles, that is the maritime area around Nisyros, because from a scientific perspective, we were able to prove that this is an area that we have been studying for many years with oceanographic missions that have come here, an area with wonderful geological formations. Where is Nisyros? Next to Turkey, but we have managed to include this maritime area and this island in the UNESCO area. This is a very ambitious plan, and we have managed to succeed in it. So, geological map. Some of you came with me this morning. We went into the craters. We felt the breathing of the planet close to us. The locals say we're going to the volcano when they come here, but for us, Nisyros is a volcano in itself. It consists exclusively of volcanic formations. All these colors that you see here are different types of lava and various volcanic forms made of rhyolites and other rocks that create the geological map of Nisyros, such as pumice, for example. Here we are in a wonderful caldera with a diameter of 4 kilometers, a caldera that is open to visitors where you can walk on the craters. Students come here. It is an open geological museum where you can truly understand the shapes of a volcano and you see everything, forms of lava and various other geological formations. So what do we need to do? And this is something that UNESCO asks for, is to have a monitoring of the volcano so that the locals can feel safe, the children of Lysiros, that we must train, we must teach us, the academics, and the visitors as well, of course, feel safe that come to Nisyros. So we have hydrothermal monitoring with regard to seismic behavior and geodetics. Here we have some images. In April and May, we had research groups from abroad. Nisyros is a pool of scientific interest, not only involving Greek academics, but also from abroad. We measured the temperature in the craters in order to try to exclude areas that people can visit safely. Here we see again the temperature of the gases, where it is highest in the ground, so we can find which are the dangerous zones where people are not allowed to go. Mr. Koumoutsakos is here. Protection is a top priority in UNESCO geoparks. Here we have geochemical analysis. Even this morning we had scientists here in installing various measurement instruments. Volcanoes give warning, not like an earthquake. We see the changes in the substrata. If the temperature, if the geochemical synthesis changes, this is a warning bell that something is happening. This is an image from a month and a half ago in Stephanos crater, where we visited with students and researchers the area in order to listen to the planet speak. This is the area of fumaroles, where the gases are emitted, areas which are not allowed, which are not opened to visitors, where we have the fumaroles. And visitors here, researchers rather, from around the world who come to this small island since it is recognized as very important by the scientific activity. And that's why it's considered a geopark. To be considered a geopark, you need to prove to UNESCO that only the Greek academic research community is interested in the island, but the world. We had a mission in the Ionian Sea where we carried out similar research. I started working here as a PhD candidate, and this map is part of my PhD thesis, where we wanted to um, connect the land and sea fractures. One caused an earthquake in 1933, and it's a fracture that is underwater, helping and it helps us to see the dynamic of this region. In 1922-23, there was a large ship, Georgish Resolution, which was carrying out research drilling in Santorini. You may ask what the connection is between Santorini and Nisyros. Well, in the course, we found the material of the volcanic explosions of Nisyros. There was a huge explosion that took place in Nisyros at that time, and we found the material from this explosion 400 kilometers to the west of Nisyros, showing that underwater activity has its own dynamic, and we need to be very careful, in particular with underwater exploration. Not to mention the example of Santorini last year, which shows the importance of underwater exploration, because without it, we wouldn't be able to reach concrete conclusions. Submarine geomorphology. I myself have been in one of these um, underwater devices. So what you see here is exactly what you see in the sea. You see here these deep sea exploration machines. Top left, you can see coral with shark eggs near the Leusa. Here we see ROV operations. When you go to a geopark, you can put your mask on, dive into the sea in Mandraki, and see precisely this spectacular landscape. Because what you see in the volcano, you see underwater with these geothermal springs. Talking about landslides and landslide risk, even if you're not a geologist, you understand that these steep slopes have a risk of landslides, such as Monastery of Panagias. That's why the municipality, always with a civil engineer department of the Polytechnic School, carries out the relevant studies in order for the monastery to be able to operate safely. So, scientists complete studies, the same as we did in Santorini. But how can we convey our knowledge without causing panic amongst the people? This is through constant information sharing. Here we see a number of scientists who got the results on site and announced them to the locals in order for them to know that we are monitoring the volcano. We are here. What is very important is also education for the young generation, and that's precisely what the geopark does. Culture is the number one. Nisyros is unique. It has it's a beautiful island. We will go to this square in Nikia very soon, where respect for tradition is an element that is key. And the area of Paleokastro. Do visit this area. It's the only castle in Greece which is not made by the Cyclops. It's made of volcanic rock, lava. They use volcanic rock to build a castle. It's worth visiting above the monastery of Panagias. Biodiversity on this island recently, together with OFIPECA and the relevant authorities, a funding was approved for the geopark of Nisyros in order to have a special biodiversity guide put together for the island of Nisyros that will further enhance the geopark's activities. Finally, a certificate, educational activities. We had a lot of educational activities on the island in recent times that visited the crater, the museum, and all the students were given this certificate. It might look like something very simple to us, but for young children, this is their inspiration in order for them to become future scientists, to get involved and love the environment. That's how you can get closer to the children and their interests. Finally, tradition and intangible cultural traditions of Nisyros, folk dancing. I did my PhD here. I was here in the winter. All people supported me greatly, and they support all researchers. And of course, the dancing and festivals are unique. So we are very proud to be a new member of the UNESCO Global Geoparks Network. We are number 10, and I think this is indeed a lucky number. we are now part of this huge UNESCO embrace. And of course, the mayor knows that now is the time for all the hard work to begin, because we achieved something that was very difficult indeed, but it's even more difficult to remain within this network. And the people know this. The heart of the geopark are not us as scientists, but the people themselves, the people of Nisyros. And that's how we must proceed from now onwards. So I invite you to visit Nisyros again. I'm sure next year we'll all be meeting together in this venue. Visit the rest of the island. I invite you to visit uh, the beauties of the planet and what it has to offer. The environment of Nisyros is indeed unique. Thank you very much. I think that was the best way to conclude Nisyros dialogue. Thank you all for your um, very active participation. Please come forward for a family photo before proceeding to the
Recording stopped.